Peter, but before that happens, tell us about your trip to Minnesota.
Well, I really had no idea what to expect, Mike, other than a clean environment. If somebody's going to let you into their training facility, you have a pretty good idea that they're going to put their best foot forward. This is the first time I've been on an airplane in 137 days. All of that went well. The traveling went fine. And at the Vikings facility, what was so interesting to me, and I wrote about this in my column in Football Morning in America, is that the first thing I see is that poor Mike Zimmer, this coach of the Vikings, he doesn't have a parking space anymore because there's a huge trailer park there. And in that trailer are 4 medical technicians in 4 bays ready to take your mid-nasal swab and your COVID-19 test. Obviously, now we know for the first 2 weeks of training camp in the NFL, these will be daily tests. Then after that, it's just touring the facility. I'd say the 2 points that really stood out to me is that if you've been in a modern NFL locker room, you know that these things are Taj Mahals. They're palaces. The Minnesota Vikings locker room is 6,500 square feet. That's twice the size of most Midwest suburban American homes. But you go in there and they've already taken out all of the couches in this place, which is so beautiful. And they have made it so that every locker has 2 empty lockers around it. So it's just every other locker that is, going to be occupied. So that's the first thing. And I think the second thing is that I think every team is going to have this issue, particularly in facilities that are not as lavish and not as new as the Vikings facility is. Here's the problem: meeting space. So it is going to be a rule in every facility in the country that no one ever sits within 6 feet of someone else. So imagine that. Like, they had an offensive line meeting room that used to be able to fit 20 people. And now, that's been cut almost in half. The linebackers, a 14-seat room, now is going to be a maximum of 8. So that is the kind of thing. One of the team meeting rooms for the Minnesota Vikings is going to be chairs out on their indoor practice field. So those are the kind of things. But again, look, you knew this was not going to be a normal year under any circumstances, and that's what I found on my trip to Minnesota.
Level of 1 to 10, with 10 being the highest, how safe do you think an environment like that is going to be as it relates to limiting the spread of the virus, understanding that eventually they're going to be on a football field where they're all intermingling their breath and their coughing and their spit and whatever. But in the facility itself, how safe do you think the players will feel?
They should feel 9 at least, if they obey the rules. And again, Mike, look, here's the issue. There's 2 issues actually. Players basically, even if they test in the morning and they're going to get the results back, they're not going to get the results back for 24 hours. So you could be positive and just not be told you were positive. You could go out on a practice field. You could have your hands on other players. At some point, it's going to be football, okay? And so other people could then, obviously become symptomatic because of contact with you. But just as far as the facility itself, I told Eric Sugarman when I left there, I said, man, you can eat off the floor in here, and you really can. That part of it is going to be fine. It's what happens at practice when people are putting their hands on each other, and what happens after 5 p.m., Mike. What happens if, rookies, 22, 23, young players, any player, just even goes out to an innocent dinner or goes out to a bar or whatever? That is what the risk is. These NFL players are not going to be in a bubble.
So, Peter, here's my big question. I mean, because it sounds like you think the medical people and everybody like that are optimistic. But I want to dive into a little bit about, the coaching aspect. And I don't know how much conversation you got there, but what's the overall feeling you're getting, whether it was in Minnesota or other coaches right now? Because that's something we brought up earlier in the show. Like, what do you do when half your offensive line room has to be in another room? How are they going to deal with some of these issues that, you're talking about with the social distancing and all that?
I think most teams, Chris, are going to do a lot of, Zoom and Microsoft Teams video conferencing.
Right.
They're going to have, I think most teams will have their big team meetings maybe after the first one. I think they're going to have their big team meetings on video conference. Just because, especially in training camp, you can't have 80 people in the same place unless, as I say, you put 100 chairs spaced out all over a practice field, and you have the coach with a microphone so everybody can hear him. I could see that. But, Chris, I think the biggest issue and you raised this issue, I think the 16-person practice squads, as Mike wrote about yesterday, the 16-person practice squads, in my opinion, are really going to have to almost be quarantined in and of themselves. If I was a coach and I was going to bring a guy on the practice squad, I would have rules for guys on the practice squad, almost liberty limiting rules on the practice squad. Hey, at the end of the day today, you go back to your hotel room. We're going to pay for you to get room service dinner and room service breakfast. We don't want you leaving the room, and those are the kind of things they're going to have to do. What are you going to do with your backup quarterback? I don't think your backup quarterback should be within 20 feet of anybody during the course of the day, because he's got to be ready. He's one of the most important guys on your roster now. Your third string quarterback now, in my opinion, has to be the scout team quarterback, not the backup quarterback. Your backup quarterback has to be kept in a pristine environment, in my opinion. And the one other thing that you mentioned,
yeah,
I think that when you have a practice squad now, you have to think about it mentally that if one position group on your team gets really savaged,
right,
you need to be specifically smart about each one of those position groups. And on your practice squad, whether you want to have 2 or 3 linebackers on that or not, you have to have it, because if your linebackers get decimated, you got to be ready to play.
Okay, so my follow-up to all that, because that was great stuff, and I know a lot of coaches in football, how far down the line do we think coaches are right now in fortifying some of their plans? And also on that, like, how frustrated are the coaches that they don't really know the rules of what's going to be going on here at training camp quite yet?
I talked to one coordinator on Friday, Chris, and I asked him, hey, what's going on? He goes, I don't know. And I was just kind of throwing out a fishing line. He goes, I don't know when I'm going back to work. I don't know when practice is going to start. We have not had any indication from their head coach, when practice is going to start, and especially for teams who are in flux.
Right.
Like, what do you do, for instance, if you're the Patriots? Somebody asked me over the week yesterday, so you really don't think that Cam Newton is a lock to start? And I said, no, I don't. I mean, Josh McDaniels has not been in Cam Newton's presence.
Right.
And it's July 21st, whatever it is today. I mean, they don't even know. He seems healthy, but they haven't been with him in practice. And now when are they going to be with him in practice? And Chris, imagine you're an NFL coach and you're told the first 21 days of training camp, you haven't had any practice, anything in the off season. The first 21 days of training camp, at least that's what the proposal was. The first 21 days of training camp are all strength and conditioning. You're not going to have a legitimate football practice until the middle of August. And 3.5 weeks later, by the way, you open your season. No one's touched anybody. No one's put on a pad.
It's crazy.
And now you've got to play games. This is going to be a season unlike any other season. And Chris, I'll just tell you one other quick thing.
Yeah.
I had an executive the other day tell me flat out, he said, this is the year that I will not be remotely surprised if the Detroit Lions are holding the Lombardi Trophy at the end of the year. Nothing against the Detroit Lions, but I doubt many people are picking them to win the Super Bowl. His whole point was very simple. What team is going to handle COVID the best? What happens if some teams are ravaged by it? And what happens if some teams are relatively untouched by it? Those are the teams, I think, that have the best chance to win.
Peter, one thing that hit me between the eyes yesterday when I read Football Morning in America, beyond the fact that Mike Zimmer lost his parking space to the BioReference Laboratories trailer, just the fact that there is a dedicated facility in the parking lot of the Vikings where the players are going to enter to be tested every day. And every team is going to have something like this. And every team is going to have at least 120 tests per day. And those are going to be turned around on a 24-hour basis. And Chris and I were talking about this last hour. The league has glossed over the ethical question of this collective drain on resources that otherwise could be devoted to members of the general public who are symptomatic, who want their test results, who need their test results. We're going to have the NFL cutting the line every day with all the players, the coaches, the trainers, the Tier 1 and Tier 2 personnel. Have you gotten any sense that people in the league are concerned about it? Have you got any sense or even aware of this impact that football is necessarily going to have on testing generally at a time when testing is more necessary than ever?
So, Mike, you ask a great question. There's going to be, early on in training camp, there will be about 5,800 tests per day devoted to NFL players and team personnel. That's a lot. I think the question that would have to be asked is, and we in our little bailiwicks, I think just don't really know the answer. But let's just say, for the sake of argument, that BioReference Laboratories did not get this contract for the NFL. Would they then be taking those 5,800 tests per day that are devoted to NFL personnel, and would those 5,800 tests be used in, let's say, suburban Houston, which is right now on fire, or in Phoenix, or all over the state of Florida, which is on fire? That's the thing I don't know. And if you could tell me assuredly that those tests would be devoted to some of the places in the country that obviously need to have a ramp up in testing, then I would say, a pox on the NFL. I just don't know if that is the case.
But here's the thing, Peter. Whoever they're using to collect the samples, whoever they're using to test the samples, those are people that could be devoting their time to testing the members of the general public.
Could be. You're right about that, Mike.
But why wouldn't they be? Why wouldn't they be? What else are they going to be doing if they're?
I don't know.
The people who would be providing those services to the NFL are able and available to provide the services to members of the general public. Anything you do with the people who are there to do that work is necessarily taking them away from the general public.
Or would it just be more corporations taking it away? So you don't know that either. I mean, to me, hey, we're flawed. The whole setup in the country's messed up. So, I'm not going to sit here and just blame the NFL for doing this, because I know there's other corporations and businesses that are starting to go down this line too. So I don't, that to me is the biggest thing. Like, I hear you, Mike. I'm not trying to be insensitive, but I just, there doesn't seem to be a law of the land on any of this right now. And we're just kind of winging it.
And can I just make one other point about this? Look, and this is a big if it is deemed that the NFL, I'm not saying the NFL is an essential business. Obviously it isn't. But if it is deemed that the NFL is going to play football, okay, one of the essential things that happens, and I agree with daily testing, okay, if it's going to happen, if the NFL is going to play, this is one of the things that has to happen. So if it does have to happen, then you have to accept the fact that 5,800 tests per day for now are going to be taken up by NFL teams. Now, that'll eventually be reduced to about 4,000, but still, and it may not be every day, but still it's a monstrous number of tests. And I get the cynical aspect of it, but if people want to watch NFL football this fall, they have to mentally get it straight in their heads that the players are going to have to be tested almost daily, and it's going to have to happen for 6 months.
Peter, I am 95% certain I read this in your column yesterday, but I read your column at 4 a.m., so I may be misremembering. Do you have a sense as to when the technology is going to get to the point where they can do a mouth swab and a faster turnaround for NFL players? Because that would seem to be the key to me. We still have that donut hole of 24 hours before you get your result.
It's essential.
When will we get to that point? Have you gotten a sense that that's coming at some point during football season?
The NFL and the Players Association believe there's a very good chance that a reliable, fairly instant test, 10 or 15 minutes, that a reliable test, daily test, is coming. But right now, they just don't feel the science is reliable enough for this test to happen. So they can't use it right now. And I don't think if I wrote anything about it, I wrote a sentence, but they just don't have that saliva test right now or the pinprick test right now that they feel is even remotely reliable.
Peter, like you mentioned just a little earlier, I mean, hey, we got the testing process. We're getting used to all these type of things and the social distancing, all of it. The proposal of maybe 3 weeks of just training before that. Did you hear anybody in Minnesota or other coaches? I don't want you to blame anybody or anything like that, but do you get a sense that executives and football people want things pushed back as far as the start of the regular season?
I don't, Chris. I didn't get that sense. And the reason that I didn't get that sense is because I'm sure there are some coaches, excuse me, who would love to see it get pushed back. But the problem is pushing it back benefits what? You're going to be more ready to play football, but you're going to be pushing it back into what could be, and what we've all been told by Dr. Fauci and others, is going to be another wave of this disease. Kyle Rudolph of the Vikings told me something very interesting. I said, "What do you fear?" And he said, I don't have any. He's got kids. He said, "I don't fear going in there. I totally trust what the union and the league and our athletic trainers, including Eric Sugarman, are going to do." But he said, "What I fear is an interruption of the season."
Right.
Because we're all going to be in good enough shape, maybe not right away, okay, but we're all going to be in football shape, and whatever shape everybody's in, we're going to be in the season and all that. And then if we have to go home and quarantine for 3 or 4 weeks and we can't work out in our normal gym, most guys don't have gyms in their houses. And so, what is going to happen if after 4 weeks, the NFL takes a pause for 4 weeks and then comes back? How do you do that? That is the biggest reason. And Chris, I'll say one other thing. There is a coach in this league who basically, I was told by one of the executives on the team, who's basically taking a totally don't worry, be happy approach to this, because he said this is the classic test of control what you can control.
Right.
And if you're a head coach in the league right now, you know that the vast majority of the normal controllable things are now out of your control. So his whole point, basically, as verbalized to me by a member of his executive staff, is that he just says, "Hey guys, it's going to be the same idiotic rules for everybody else. So let's just go out and do what we can and try our best to win."
Peter, last thing for me here. This is one thing that just popped up as you've kind of talked about this. Are they ready for the time constraints that are going to happen here? Like, are they going to have 90 guys? Okay, what if 90 guys all show up in that tent right away in the morning? Are they all, just going to wait in line until they get tested? Or are they going to have, times for guys to come in? Because in the NFL, if you have 8 o'clock team meeting, a lot of guys show up at 7:40 and things like that. So what's going to happen, I guess, there? And then the next thing I want to know is 90 guys in training camp and the showering situation. I'm not trying to be a pervert here, but showering in a normal facility is hard. That to me is something that we haven't talked about. How are they going to work that out too? Sorry, I know I don't mean to ask you everything, but you're the great wizard of the NFL, so I figure you got to answer.
No. And Chris, I'll just tell you this. Although I did not get swabbed the other day when I was at the Vikings, I think each one of these tests is going to take less than 30 seconds.
Right.
And so I believe that they're just going to tell players, I should have asked this question, but I believe they're just going to tell players, hey, look, show up at 7 o'clock, or maybe they'll do position groups, linebackers 7 o'clock, running back 7:05.
Right.
However,
right.
Okay. And you ask about the shower.
Yeah.
This I found very interesting. All right. So in the I actually walked into the shower area of their locker room. And what's going to happen is that every other shower head is going to be removed. It wasn't removed the other day, but every other shower head is going to be capped so that there's going to be, in fact, about 10 feet in between each person who is showering.
Gotcha.
And so that really is going to be weird because you're right. You can't all shower at once. There just isn't going to be enough resources to all shower at once. So I do think that is going to have to be staggered when actual practice and drills end for everybody on the team.
Peter, excellent work last week in Minnesota. We look forward to what else you will be bringing to the table now that Football Morning in America is back following your annual vacation. I learned a lot. It was a great read, and we appreciate some of your time this morning. We'll talk to you soon.
You're the man, Peter.
Good to be on with you guys.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.